Yeah. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us ArtsFest Online this evening. This evening's event is a poetry reading and talk with writer, poet, dancer and choreographer Helen Calcutt. Helen's poetry, journalism and critical writing features in many publications such as The Guardian and the Huffington Post. Her most recent collection of poetry, Somehow, was published by Verve Poetry Press in September 2020. And it is from this collection that Helen will read from this evening. Your host for the session is writer R.M. Francis. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box rather than the chat box, and Rob will pick those up throughout the session. Welcome both. Over to you, Rob.
Thanks very much, Claire, and welcome everyone to another ArtsFest Online event. My name's Rob Francis. I'm one of the lecturers in creative and professional writing here at the University of Wolverhampton. And I am absolutely delighted to be hosting this event, which in many ways is a celebration of the great success of Helen Calcutt, who is a phenomenal writer and one of our graduates as well. I'll have to definitely get that in there, and there might be a couple of pointed questions to you later, Helen, about your time here at Wolves. The big thinking behind this event is to celebrate Helen's recent publication success with her Verve Poetry Press pamphlet, Somehow, which I read over the last week and have reread a couple of times. And it really is a staggering collection of poems, very, very tenderly and beautifully put together, about very, very difficult things to talk about. And I think one of the powers of Helen's writing, and this collection in particular, is her deft ability to point to things that we all know exist, but haven't really found the right words to properly discuss them. And I hope that's a useful intro to this collection, without giving too much away for people that are definitely going to be going out and buying this after the event. So the way that tonight is going to work is we're going to open it up with a reading from Helen, and then I'm going to throw a few questions at her for a few moments. And please contribute to this by using the Q&A option in Zoom, and I will filter some questions between my own observations and thoughts and yours as well. And then we'll finish with another trip into Somehow and Helen's reading. So I give you the very brilliant Helen Calcutt, everyone.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. I'd say it's lovely to see you all, but I can't see you all, but it's lovely to have you all here with me. So I'm going to start with a poem that I often start with, which is very early on in the collection. I'll just show it you again. Here it is. It's very beautiful. Just want to talk about the cover art for a second as well. This is by Catherine Shears, and it's an original painting that she allowed us to use for the cover, and it's called Enough. And she did share with me recently the background to the painting, and I can't go into details, but it chimes really well with what the collection is about, and her artwork is just exquisite, so you must check her out. It's Catherine Shears. Anyway, so I'm going to start with a poem called Light, and the reason I'd like to start with this one is because it was the first poem that I really put together properly after Matthew passed away. I've always sort of had this connection with light in my work. It's always sort of been in there, but when Matthew died, it was such a bright September. It was almost a joke. It was so sunny, but it seemed to have some meaning to it, and I don't know what that meaning is still yet, but this poem is sort of explores that idea, this sense of there being so much light after such loss. So I'm going to read it to you now, and I hope you can all hear me. Just let me know if I'm too quiet or if I need to speak up. So this is Light. For days now, light has been walking in through the window. For days, the leaves have followed it. When I look one way, they flock the sun. Their foldings flicker like innate conversation. For days, I have wanted the light to be just light. But the way she carries her body is tipsy thin, and the trees are too. They lift up their hair and weep, tipsy song. And they are leaning and talking and making everything about the circumstances of the light. The way she folds and clutters and tussles and mutters and makes everything bright in the room. It feels so crude. All the aching corners I wanted to be hard have softened to the tune of her touch. In her brightest moments, as I've cowered and cried or gone crazy on the bed, light has thrown light and pulled the sobbing up over my head. And they have said, grief is a family of birds thrown from the nest. That light in this capacity must be some coincidence. He isn't in the room. He didn't come. My hands aren't wings and the roof doesn't burn. And the next poem is called Found. It's very, very different to the one I've just read. I just want to do a little trigger warning before this one, because it's quite a raw poem. If this is a subject, loss or suicide, or anything like that, really, that is quite near to you at the moment, perhaps you could mute this one, or feel free to turn the sound off at any point if it gets too much. I need to put that out there though with this one. There needs to be a little warning. So this is called Found, but it's also a found poem. All the words in this poem are taken from Matt's post-mortem report. And I remember I was reading it one day and I just wanted to play with the language so that I could really get to grips with what's happened. I think that's the reason why I wrote it. But it just struck me how cold the language was against the backdrop of this huge trauma and this huge loss. It just felt completely incongruous. So this is just an exploration of the language against that grief. So, Found. She found him in the dark at the bottom of the stairs. Body of a male hanging by ligature. The mark was deep, 1 centimetre, but no scar. She had to cut the suspension point with scissors. The ligature in circumference, 47 centimetres. Impression is of someone with moderate anxiety, who appeared at times of domestic distress, ideated suicide, but denied intent. Larynx, trachea, bronchi, normal. Mouth, pharynx, esophagus, unremarkable. History of anxiety since 2006. Prescribed citalopram 20 milligrams, 20 milligrams. No ligature received. There is nothing significant about the deceased. And just a little footnote as well with that poem, something I've realised is I've never really wanted to place blame, but I think the more I read it, the more I realise that line, no ligature received, and then preceding it, there's all these reasons perhaps why we could have noticed it, you know. Impression is of someone with moderate anxiety, appeared at times of domestic distress, ideated suicide. I mean, these are all things that were said to someone and that were, I don't know, I don't want to say neglected, but maybe passed off as not so much of a problem when really it was. That's just something that's come to me later, and poems can do that. They can make you realise things you never thought you would realise. And so I'm just going to do one more before we have a little chat. And I love this poem. This was published by Ink, Sweat and Tears originally. And it's just about the wonder and wisdom of children, and the healing places they can bring you to. So this is a conversation with my daughter about my brother's suicide. She is awake. The moon is bright and the clouds have parted. The trees are painted trees, living a still life. She tells me my brother is in the moon. I've bathed her, given her milk, and as I fold the sheets from her knees to her lap, she asks me how he died. He was very sad, I say, and she seems to understand. She rubs the milk away from her lips with her hands as if the moon had kissed her, and then asks why. I try to explain. Sadness can make you very tired. It can make you want to sleep. It can make you want to close your eyes on everything. Her hands are leaves resting on the bed covers. She asks me if I miss him, and when I say I do, she asks me again how he died. If the sadness of missing him will make me die. I hold her then. I accept the weight of her. I can feel her widening like the stillness of a tree, my child coming into a still life. Then we talk about the moon being the shape of an egg upside down. Watch branches touch on drifting clouds and agree. We want to see everything. Okay, thank you very much. Those are my first 3 poems.
Thank you very much, Helen. That was marvellous and beautifully read as well. It's difficult on these online events because really I want everybody to stand up and applaud.
Maybe they are. You don't know.
I mean, in spirit at least we are standing up and applauding. So we'll hear a bit more from Helen's poetry at the back end of the session, but right now I would like to pose a few questions, and obviously if you guys at home have got some things that you want me to ask, then please pop it into the Q&A, and I will do my best to get around to everyone's questions. I think what I'd like to start with, Helen, is well, you touched on it briefly anyway, and maybe just discussing some of these things will help illuminate things for everyone and for yourself. But I'd like to talk about the images that seem to weave their way into the collection. So, and they tend to be, at least from my observation, quite fleeting and ephemeral types of images, often associated with either the natural realm or with the climate, I suppose. So we've got light that you picked up on, but also birds and branches and trees, and particularly the kind of the tricky spaces between land and water seems to appear as well. What do you think? What were your thought processes about this? I mean, was it an accident, or are these deliberate sort of symbols in this work for the grief, I guess?
That's a great question. No, they're not deliberate. This is really interesting you bring this up, because I was having a chat with somebody about this recently who's been looking through my new stuff. And we were discussing how I use natural imagery a lot, probably as a way of giving the thing I want to talk about a space. And they were saying, do you want to try talking about the thing without that? Just give it a go. Right. Okay. But for the purposes of this collection, they just sort of work their way in. I think it's they just seem to, especially grief, I think it just exists in the natural world, because I think it's where, especially if you lose somebody, I think in my mind anyway, it's where they go back to. So you look to that space for a way of connecting with them again, or with it, or with what's happened. I do think that I do find light very inspiring, just the things it does to shadows, and how it can affect a room, how it can make it seem bigger or smaller, or how it can make someone's skin look, or how it can make the whole landscape appear different, depending on the quality of the light, you know, whether it's moonlight or it's dusk or it's dawn. So I do deliberately reach out for these things, but with this collection, they just came in. They just wanted to be in there. They just wanted to exist within the work, I think.
Lovely, yeah. And yeah, there's a sense that happens in poetry quite a lot. And you hear writers saying things like, you know, it's as if the characters were talking through me, and that kind of thing. And I think images and movement for poets work in a very similar way as well, because so much of what we're dealing with is, I mean, outside of the kind of musicality of the language, it's about movement and image in lots of ways for me anyway, and that's definitely demonstrated in your work. Is there anything else you think you might add in terms of what I was saying about them having this kind of intangible otherness quality to them as well? I mean, you speak very eloquently about how light touches things and changes things, and how it causes shadows and that changes things more. But also with the ideas of, I mean, water does very similar things in your work, as well as the kind of the very subtle movement of the bird's wing or the blowing of the tree. We've got something that's recognizable and solid, but also very, very difficult to define.
Okay. I hadn't noticed the water. You picked up on something I haven't noticed. I think it must just, there's a lot I don't notice in my work, and I use these words really readily without really thinking about it. I think it's because I'm so used to using them. I think with the bird's wing, for example, they're very profound things to see. They're very common, but if you really look at them when they occur, like a wing beat is actually quite a profound movement, because it's quite powerful. Even though it might be at a distance, it's quite a thing to be around or to witness. And I think when you see these profound things, you hook your own profound experiences onto them and somehow try and make sense of how profound, I can use that word a lot, but how these powerful things in the natural world, which we are a part of. I think the problem is we see ourselves as not a part of it, but we are a part of it. How they connect, you know, how is the loss of Matthew connected to a wing? There will be a connection in there somewhere if you want to find it enough. But the fact that they're fleeting, that you use that word, that's interesting. Now that you say it, they do come in and out, and I do think I use them as a way of explaining things that I can't seem to explain in any other way, maybe.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's the nature of grief in lots of ways as well, isn't it? Especially
Yes.
grief that's as difficult to deal with as you've had to.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
that again, it's something that we're all relatively familiar with, but in the abstract,
Yeah.
and it's very, very difficult to think of it outside of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful, I think. Anyway, I mean, this must have been. I mean, when I'm writing my work, I find it very, very difficult if I'm attempting to write something that I feel is too close to me. Although I'm very passionate about the subjects that I write about, there's always a kind of sense of being an observer rather than an active participant. How did you navigate the very difficult waters of writing something that is so personal and as well as being such a tricky subject to do justice to, I guess?
Yeah. I think with the use of natural imagery, going back to it for a minute, I think it acts as a safety net almost, like to begin with, as a way in. How did I navigate it? I couldn't write about it very well for a very long time. That's the first thing. I wrote lots of different things that came out, but I've got hundreds of poems literally that are just awful because they just all came out maybe a year after, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that must have been hard on its own as well, to have something that you know as as an objective poet going, I know that's not a very good piece of work, but it means a hell of a lot to me personally.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of the editors who have read lots of stuff that isn't in this pamphlet even. I've just gone, it's not a good poem. And I've gone, what? No, it is. Because of my feelings. But this is the thing. It's kind of I think really over time there's a difference between cathartic writing and writing well.
Yeah.
So I think over time you just remove yourself and go, well, how can I make this a good poem then? Now that I've got all the stuff out, because I did use writing as a way of getting the stuff out, definitely. Then how can I if I want to write about this, and I did make a decision, I thought, right, I am going to write about this because it needs to be talked about for me and for other people. But how can I write about it in a way that does it justice, that does Matthew justice and my grief justice, and the readers, they can read something that they want to read. So you have to, I did definitely completely step outside of myself and just work as an editor for a long time on all the raw stuff. So right. it was essentially in terms of navigation, as you say, it was actual self-removal for a bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that strikes me as a good method to go into any kind of creative practice with as well, really. I mean, yeah. And again, in my own practice and in all of my favorite writers, really, there's always, I kind of think about it in terms of a musical analogy. I'm a big rock music fan, so I like poems, and I like all my art really to have that kind of raw energy from the jam, energy of improv, energy of that first draft.
Yes, I agree.
Then for it to be, then for the screws to turn and everything to be nicely polished.
Yes, yeah.
That putting the editor's hat on must have been a useful and interesting part of your grief, as well as your writing process as well.
It was, and I had a lot of help. Zoe Bridgeley Thompson did a great deal of work on it with me. It got to a point where you read your stuff and you just can't even see what you've written anymore. You're just like, ugh. So I needed I needed to work with somebody who understood what I was trying to do, and she definitely did. And she didn't change much, but she just came in and kind of tilted things a bit and kind of removed lines that I really wanted to keep hold of, but it was for an emotional reason, not for a structural or for any kind of for anything that served the poem that made it better. I was just holding on to it because I felt attached to it emotionally. But she just very gently sort of said, let's think about taking these out or moving this around. Or she was great like that. And I think when you are working with such personal themes, it is important to share it, because you can get so stuck in your emotional jar with it. Like, I want it to be this way because I'm the one that's in pain, but okay, yeah, but the poem might need something else. So it was, and also she pointed out the word somehow, the editorial process, it had a completely different title. And then she went, you use somehow all the time, and she underlined them all, and she said, this needs to be the title. And that was an editor. And then it made me realize, I was thinking, so somehow you get through this. What does somehow mean? It means in some way by some means. So in some way by some means, you can go from here to here, and it can be okay-ish. So yeah, and that was a personal journey as well as a poetic one. So yeah, it does help.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just for the sake of people that don't know as much about this as you, because I know that you've done as well as somehow. You were involved in another V press.
Yeah, it was V press. It was
Verve.
Oh, Verve. No, Verve. Yeah.
Verve Poetry Anthology 84. And so could you maybe just say a few things about why this subject is so dear to you outside of what we already know, and what it means in a kind of wider context of our social worlds at the moment?
Yeah. Okay. So some of you will probably know, but some of you may not. So September 2017, my eldest brother took his own life. So, which was a shock. And looking back, perhaps not the biggest shock, but yes, at the time it was just, you can imagine. I mean, some of you may be here because you have lost loved ones in similar ways. I don't know. But so that's what started everything. And a couple of years later, or maybe a year and a half later, I was looking at the Me Too anthology. And I was thinking, is there something I can do for Matt? Is there something I can do for Matt? Because I just felt, you just feel sort of hopeless when something like that happens. You feel like you should do something. Because when somebody does something like that, when they take their own lives, it's like they've started a dialogue with you that you can't possibly enter into. They're telling you something very important about their emotional well-being and their emotional state, but they do it to the extent that you can't say anything back to it. So you wrestle with that first, like there's just this exhausting going round and round, like what could I have said? What could I have done? So I went to Stuart Bartholomew at Verve and said, can we do an anthology, which you were involved in, weren't you?
Rob? I was, yeah.
You were.
Very graciously accepted one of them.
Well, it was a great poem. Sorry, my children are being noisy. I'm very sorry if they're really loud. And I said, can we do something? Can we raise money for CALM? Because CALM is the Campaign Against Living Miserably, is one of the leading charities for male suicide prevention and male suicide awareness, because it is the biggest killer of men in the UK. 84 men take their own lives every week. That's every week, not every month. And I didn't know this until Matthew passed away, and it's incredible. It says a lot about the pressures women feel them too, but men must, I think, feel a particular sort of pressure. I don't understand what that is yet, but it must be I think it's a lot of it's to do with society and how it's structured. And Stuart agreed. He said, yes, we can put some poems together, but how do you want to do it? And so then we did the call out for poems on the subject, or on grief, on loss, on suicide, on trauma, on vulnerability. And that came out in 2019. And then from there, I just thought, well, perhaps I should put something quite personal out. And so from there, I got to writing somehow. So it was a process. I had to do something editorial first, and then something personal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on behalf of a lot of people, I think, but me personally as well, I thank you very much for your poetry collection, and as a campaigner as well. And I see your work in 84 as a campaigner, as well as an excellent editor. You know, I think the statistics are absolutely harrowing, and you know, I think it needs to be said as often as we can, really, to say, you know, if you're a man and you're between the age of 25 and 40, you are basically running a gauntlet, and that is absolutely terrifying, and we should be ashamed of ourselves for it, really.
It is the statistic. It is, and it's easy to forget. And it's something we need to keep talking about. Why? Like, what is happening here to our lovely men? What is this? Why do they feel like they're in the bell jar? And there are women's issues that must be talked about, in equality and so many other things. But that I'm a strong advocate for all of that. I talk about it all the time. But I also think that there are men's rights and men's issues, and they need to be talked about as well, because there's obviously something going on here that we must wrap our head around, and we must understand. We must keep talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to have some very difficult and brutal conversations about it as well.
Yeah, it's hard to know where to start or how to get into it, but yeah, we do. And it is still, I was talking about this to a Calm campaigner the other day, there's still a wall, there's still from society and from a lot of, I don't want to say, from a lot of some organisations that could perhaps be more supportive, they just really don't want to go there, I think, because it's seen as a distraction from women's rights, but it isn't. They can exist on a balance, on a par, and they should, really. We need to be talking about both, like, what's going on here, and is there a connection? There may be a connection. I think perhaps there is. I don't know. Yeah,
definitely. I wish we had more time to properly delve into this. Maybe we'll have
one day. Let's do it one day. Let's have a big chat.
And
yeah.
Do a long form conversation or something and properly talk it through.
Yeah.
Let's I want to move on to your writing process a little bit,
okay.
And perhaps move back to the bird's wing.
Okay.
Because as much as the kind of natural and image is so strong in your work, so is movement. And I'm intrigued to hear how your dance practice and expertise sort of cross-pollinates with your poetry.
Yeah. Okay. How does it work together? They don't. Yeah, it must inform it, I think, because I get the same when I'm choreographing something, let's say for a theatre production or just even a technique class or anything like that. I get the same kind of hypnotic vibe that I get when I'm writing. So that must be coming from the same place, I think. I haven't brought my poetry and dance together yet. I mean, my plan actually is to do launch next year into some dance research into how I can translate, how I can find a method of translating poetry into dance, like an actual method that you can tap into and use. So I am thinking about bringing them both together because it would make sense. But I think yeah, it's something I haven't realised until talking about it more and more, until people have pointed it out, and you pointed it out, and a couple of other people have pointed it out to me recently, that the poetry has movement, to the point where some editors have had to pull it back and say, this does not make any sense like this, like you have to restructure it. But sometimes I just really love to kind of play with just letting lines fall in weird places and letting lines drop out here because it feels right. And again, that's the same feeling I get when I'm choreographing. And I suppose with dance it's a little more abstract, so you can do those crazy drops or those crazy falls, or you can break things up in a certain way, and it looks right because it's a dance. When you put that into a poem, you've got the language, there's the meaning there, and you need to think about how the flow will affect the meaning for the reader and so on. So what I'm saying is the dance does feed in, but it feeds in organically. I don't like pull on it and go, so I'm a dancer, so I'll write a poem like I dance. It doesn't happen like that. It comes in naturally on its own.
Interesting. I'd be very interested to hear more about this, these kind of dance poetics as well. I can imagine that being very, very fruitful experiment.
I think so. I think it's going to be Worcester Uni, and we're just going to, and fingers crossed, Alice Oswald may be involved as well. We will see. It all depends on funding. But yeah, the idea is to just hammer out this method, and then hopefully from there create some kind of performance. We will see.
That sounds amazing. I'll keep my fingers crossed for you.
Thank you.
We've got a couple of questions from the chat.
Okay.
I have anonymous viewer wants to know, so that I guess this is slightly connected to what we've just been talking about, whether or not you have a writing routine.
Mm-hmm.
And let me add to that as well, whether there's a writing routine this person wants to know, in terms of kind of whether you're a writer of the morning, whether you use a notebook or a laptop or you type or whatever. And also, just from my point of view, I'd like to know a little bit whether on what your sort of creative sort of thought process is when you're sitting down to write.
Okay. Okay, routine. I do have a routine in that I will go for very long stretches not writing anything. I'm talking maybe months.
Wow.
And then I'll have enormous bursts where I will write 10, 15, 20 poems in maybe a few weeks, and then I'll stop again, and then I'll come back to it. So that seems to be I'm in a writing burst at the moment, but prior to the last couple of weeks I hadn't written anything for about 5 months. So that's definitely a rhythm I've got into. I'm better writing in the morning. I'm very clever in the morning. I'm not so smart after 2 p.m. And I always start writing in a notebook, because the best poems I will sometimes do it direct transfer to Word, but the best poems always come out when I use a pen. And I can't use lined paper. I can't use lined paper, so it has to be like blank. And then it's my favourite bit is to write in a book and then type it up and see what have I written, and then see how I can edit it and make it better. So that's really my routine, and it's definitely in the morning. So I've got a very small daughter, so when she's having a nap, I'll get in there for a couple of hours and have a write, and then she'll wake up and then have another nap, and then I'll go and write again. So it's a nice little rhythm at the moment. But then, talk to me in a few weeks, I might not be writing anything going, ooh. So I don't know. It's definitely yo-yos.
Got yeah, lovely. And do you think there's a difference in the mindset? Or there's something kind of maybe physiological happening when you're physically writing in a notebook as opposed to typing?
Yeah, I think because it's more of a physical act. So I've always thought that writing is very physical, actually. Even though you're sitting still, it's really hard on your arm, and it's quite an intense thing to do. I mean, it's not static. You're moving all the time when you write. So we have to try and get out of that idea that it's you know, we're just sitting. You're moving a lot. You shuffle around. If you count the number of times you shuffle in your seat when you're writing, you'd be quite surprised how many places you move in and what directions you go in. Yeah, it does. I think it connects you to the thing that you need to be writing about, the thing that's made you sit down and go, or get your notebook out, or wherever you are. I think it grounds you. And I think when you're grounded like that, it's more wholesome, and the poems just seem to come better.
Okay. Yeah. But there's definitely something about that sense of being grounded, either physically or sort of emotionally grounded.
Yeah. Emotionally too, definitely.
Lovely. Okay, I've got another question from Gab this time, who wants to know, may the ills that men suffer, as well as the ills that women suffer, be connected to a capitalist that is an essentially exploitative social order? Love the collection, by the way. So is it in some way the fault of exploitative capitalism?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's got a lot to do with it. I think it has got a lot to answer for, indeed. Yeah, on I think it affected men and women differently, very differently. And I won't talk about women because we'll leave that for today because we don't have much time. But yes, I think the pressure on the man to earn the money and be the man is just one of the biggest problems out there. It's nonsense. And it's, if I can just talk about women for a moment, it's a problem for the woman because it means the woman is the woman, and you know, it's the role. And even though there's a lot of work to change kind of the accepted perceptions of what the role of a man is and the role of a woman is, they're not really changing that much. If you just look at the media, for example, it's just all still there. And the way that we are expected to work, really, if you look at how women are treated when they have children, the man goes off and makes the money, and that's a huge pressure on a man, and it's a huge disappointment for a woman. So, you know, yeah, it's got a lot to answer for. It needs to change.
I wonder whether the type of work is a big issue as well.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, with this being a relatively modern phenomena, the huge social shifts that have happened since the 70s do seem to coincide with it all as well, don't they?
I think so. By type of work, what do you mean? What sort of work do you mean?
Well, actually, I mean traditionally gendered masculine labor.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that goes hand in hand with men not really being encouraged to be very vulnerable or sensitive. It's still something that is not really acknowledged or welcomed, really, not really. I mean, it's kind of, people talk about it, but the actual acceptance of it on a much broader scale within the fabric of society hasn't happened yet, I don't think. I think one of Matt's huge downfalls was that he had no creative outlet, and he was a very creative guy, but because of the pressures on him, he had to go out and work very hard at a job I'm not sure he liked that much, day in, day out. He knew universal credit was coming as well. He was a manager at a job centre in Wolverhampton, actually. And he knew universal credit was coming, and that was a problem to him. He really struggled with the idea of having to roll that out. Yeah, and he just had no time to do anything that he loved. So I think, or that was in any way kind of gentle on his vulnerability as a human being, because he is vulnerable. We're all vulnerable. So, and that's what the anthology talks about as well, is vulnerability in all of us is not something that is discussed enough or widely accepted enough, and it's just innate in us all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think the sort of rush of it all as well. And again, this is something that affects everybody, but I think that the issue of not, you know, no longer being able to kind of have a lunch break for many people, and
Mm, yeah.
sit and
Yeah,
chew
yeah.
just
Yeah.
talking nonsense.
Mhm.
Those little avenues of outlets have slowly closed in.
Yeah, yeah.
And men men tend to communicate in peculiar codes, you know. Women, and I hate, excuse me for generalizing everyone, but men don't tend to say, how was your day? Oh, this is how my day was. And, you know,
No, but, yeah, but
I'm going
they
to tell you
communicate
everything,
differently.
all the details that I think you want to hear about it.
Yeah.
We're a bit more kind of sly, I guess, about the detail, but the details are there.
Yeah.
I think not being able to have the space to kind of have those coded conversations.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's a really interesting point. You see, this is something I don't know about though, because it's not a world I know or understand, and it should be talked about a lot more, in my opinion. I never thought of that, but yeah, if I think about it, if I try and get some information out of my partner, it's like threads, like by thread by thread, like just how are you? How was your day? Like it takes a long time when there's women coming and go. Blah, 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 blah. So yeah, it is important to kind of encourage men to keep talking. And I hadn't, yeah, perhaps they need those spaces, and if those spaces are going, then they need to be reinstated if they're a channel for if they're an outlet. It's important that they're there.
Yeah, too right. Right, I have one more question from Anonymous again. Who wants to know, what is a bad poem? Can you identify what a bad poem is? With the hope, I suppose, of being able to identify what a good one is.
Yeah. I think you just sort of know, really. Okay, I'll come at it from my own work because it's all subjective. You just sort of know, I think, when you read it, that's not working. I think if you really listen to your gut, I'd like to say there's no such thing as a bad poem, but there is. It's just it's knowing how to admit it, or just say that, yeah, this isn't any good. Let's not. I think, who said it? Was it Pascal Petit said sometimes you just have to, or was it Sasha? Maybe it's Sasha Dugdale said it instead. I can't remember, but someone said sometimes you just have to say, this poem isn't working. It's not good enough. And you don't have to hammer. You don't. They don't all have to work. Like, you can just sometimes go no. And I think you know that. And I think poems that work rather than good, poems that work just flow and they lift off the page and they make sense, and they take the reader somewhere without confusing them. They kind of ignite you. I think that's a good poem. So if it's a good poem, then the lack of that, I guess, would be a bad one. But I'd rather say one that doesn't work rather than bad. Yeah.
You're too kind. I would definitely say bad.
Yeah.
But lovely. Well, on that note, then, let's hear some more good poetry.
Oh, thank you.
Or poetry that works.
Yeah.
And go out and buy Helen's pamphlet somehow with Verve Poetry Press, who are an excellent Birmingham-based press that do a lot of really, really cool stuff, including the Verve Poetry Festival. I give you, ladies and gentlemen, one last time, Helen Calcutt.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to read two, maybe three. Let's see how we do for time. So this next one is called A Mountain That Is Your Grief You Can't Utter, which was going to be the title of the pamphlet until Zoe pointed out that it should be much shorter, and that somehow it's just in every poem almost. This is the first poem that I put together about my grief. It's not about Matthew, it's about my grief. So about my relationship with it, what form it takes. I mean, I don't really think I even know what it is yet, but this is the beginnings of trying to figure out what it is. And we have the wing beat in this poem as well. So this is a mountain that is your grief you can't utter. I remember the night I saw one as I crossed the bridge. Its long wings slipped into twilight over my head, and it landed, grey amongst shadows, with the river running, as it does here, fast and dark, like dirty coins amongst the glitter. I wanted to follow it, though I was going home to a house of light. I stared hard. The stars wouldn't come forward, and I looked a long time from the mouth of the bridge, feeling for a mountain, with the dark bearing down like a wing. I saw the sloping bones of the heron. I felt desire, and then a longing to bend just so, with my head on my chest and a long mouth, and my heart beating just inches above the iron bed of water, to know it intimately, like a friend. Yeah, we will have 3. So this is the this is going to be the penultimate poem. It's called Rope. So again, a trigger warning. If this subject is close to you, this might be a difficult poem. I wanted to try and write something that reimagined that night when Matthew passed away. I have so many questions about it. I'm not there yet. I don't think I've really written the poem that really kind of gets into how I feel about what happened there, or what actually happened there. I haven't done it yet, and there's so many others like this. And this is just the beginnings of my exploration of it and my interpretation. It's also been made into a film, a dance film by Paul Stringer. If you want to check it out, he's done a beautiful job. It's called Rope. And Nathan Sebastian Lafayette is the dancer in it, and it's just sublime. So you must check it out. But I will read you this poem version now. Rope. He counts the length with his thumb. How many lives? Like the shadow of a red tree the moon eclipses, how suddenly will he disappear? And by how many, I mean, how many will grieve when he falls backwards into that dark stare, and the roof smiles down like a mother? Will there be branches closing round? Will something sweet on the air lift him, make it quick, take his body pale and priestly to God? Or will he struggle like a fish on the end of his hook? Will his baby son, finding the bed is cold, go looking for daddy? Will his son's father's father wake with a racing heart to the sound of geese turning their hearts overhead? Will the length of time, counting the minutes it takes to die, deter him from dying? Will the journey from his bed to that dark stair hold him back just enough, hearing some blowing resistance and stop? Or is this all a dream I want to make into poetry? Did he even count the length of rope, thinking of us, maybe, as he ran the length between fingers and thumb, not counting, but knowing? Was this one of those rare yet common moments? As swans burst out of the sky, catching fire, burning from the world as they hit water that we don't even see. And the last poem is, I've chosen it to be the last one because I think it's quite an uplifting one. We went camping maybe a year or two after Matthew died, and there was just this almighty storm in the night, and all I remember to begin with is that my partner was outside just banging the tent poles down into the ground because he thought we were literally going to take off. It was just the biggest storm in the world. But it stayed with me because it was a time where I really just felt Matthew come back. I don't know whether it was just the elemental upheaval, whether it was just being in a completely different space, but I just felt him revisit me that night when everything was raging. And I came away feeling quite uplifted and relieved that he is somewhere in all of this still. So this is the last poem, and it's called Brother Blowing. Somewhere. I am somewhere between sleeping and waking, the whole blowing silk of our tent lifting and inflating, needy as a lung. Midnight perhaps, or not long after. The moon has disappeared, the black wind cries in the leaves, the whole sky's a blowy saint, the sound of trees. My child lies asleep in the corner, unaware. A storm is moving into our room, conductive as a hand. I fold my blanket over her ears, her precious head. All around, the sky that lives out there is moving in here. Our bed space swings, the tassels knock as coast clouds sent in far over the dark unrest the body of our gentle room. They said it would come. It's both sad and beautiful to watch the light blow. Watch it go with the air so easily, then return again as easily. I lie. I breathe within thin walls, astounded. I imagine jellyfish brains smashed over a rock, that we are the only light, while our tenting soul flaps to climb high as high. Oh, are we anchored just right? And it's then you drop flight, hollowed bird, my brother blowing. You smile as you enter the room. You make breathing noises. You set down the two ends of your being like cloth. You set down the two ends of your being like the wings of a dove. You wrap the cloak of your exposure around my eyes, strangely warm. And when the tent poles shake, I can feel you've come. Feel that death isn't dark, that the dead aren't bright. They just come this way when you need their light. And I truly see you, my God. I truly feel you here. It's so good to be like this. Fearful, but alive. Alive and so very, very far from where you died. Oh, my brother, how you're blowing in my ears and eyes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you on behalf of everyone at the University of Wolverhampton and to everybody listening. That was really wonderful. Thanks very much. And let me welcome back my comrade in arms, Claire Buckerfield.
Thank you, Rob. Oh, Helen, that was incredible. So moving. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely. Thank you so much.
Come back at any time. You are more than welcome.
Well,
I certainly think it's a conversation that, as you say, needs to continue, doesn't it? And you know, you're all welcome to come back on this platform and continue that. Please do. It's lovely to meet you. Rob, as always, thank you for hosting. Always a pleasure. Just to let you all know, our next ArtsFest Online event will be on Thursday, 10th of December at 6:30 p.m. and is a literary salon with publishers Myriad Editions and 4 of their authors, all of whom will be discussing and reading from their recent short story collections. More information and booking details on that can be found on Eventbrite. Thanks for watching. See you all soon.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.